Hello, everybody, and welcome to Red Wings Daily, presented to you by FanArch. I'm your host, Kirk MckNight, author of The Voices of Hockey, Broadcasters Reflect on the Fastest Game on Earth, coming to you from the southwest corner of Washington State, 2,454 miles from Little Caesars Arena. Now, before we talk a little bit more about LCA and tonight's matchup against the Hurricanes, I want to thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate your viewership, and we appreciate your subscriptions. If you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please do. We want to get our numbers up. We want to also get to the point where we're making at least a couple thousand views for every video. This is our 40th. We're over 40,000 views altogether on the channel, averaging about 1,000 an episode. We want to double that. So please tell your friends. Red Wings or hockey fans alone. We want to talk about things going on in Motown, but we also want to talk about things, maybe get a little bit more in depth on the Tantrum Tuesday. Even if there's not a fisticuffs happening in Detroit or during a Detroit game, there is obviously something going on in the league elsewhere. So we definitely want to look outside and see how other teams are standing up in their own divisions, if there's any kind of races taking place to see who can get a good playoff spot, who can get the top spot in the division. We're always going to be talking hockey. It's not necessarily, obviously, it's going to be mostly Detroit, but if you're a hockey fan, it's always good to be tuned in, especially as we start to get close to these trade deadlines and things that are happening. There's going to be a lot of chatter. We'll talk about that at the end of the show with the rumor mill, but like I said, we value your input. We've changed things around the show. If people have been interested in certain things and maybe not so interested in certain things, we've taken away from them. We got rid of the no cap recap. People got sick of hearing me say Riz and for real, for real. They didn't really say that specifically, but I know it's the things that they probably didn't want. So we got rid of the no cap recap, and don't miss it too much. I thought it might be a good way to connect with the younger generation, but honestly, when a 40-something guy like me goes and tries to handle a language that he absolutely knows nothing about, it really falls flat. So continue with the input, folks. We want to hear it, and we really value anything that you give our way. So back to the action. The Red Wings, Saturday night, north of the border, took on the Montreal Canadiens, and I had mentioned on Friday's show the fact that the Red Wings were probably going to go into the game not in first place. Obviously, with Tampa winning 9 games in a row, and I think they were idle the last time the Red Wings played and got the win. Red Wings were first, but not for that long. Obviously, Tampa got their win with 2 points, leapfrogged them into first, and then while Detroit was idle, the Canadiens had another win as well. And so entering Saturday's game against the Canadiens, they had a virtual tie, Montreal with the game in hand. Red Wings took care of business, though, shutting them out 4-0 in their own place to not only break that virtual tie, but leapfrog back over Tampa Bay and into first in the Atlantic Division. So way to go with that one. It was a very solid effort by the Red Wings. I cannot say enough about that game. Only in the penalty box for 2 minutes out of 60. So we only had to kill one penalty, and that we did. 1-for-1 on the penalty kill, a shutout for Gibby. Gibby is 12-2 in his last 14. He's won 3 straight starts, as the Red Wings have won 3 straight games. It was a solid effort in the crease for Gibby. He's really coming into his own in this season, and he's looking like he's been a great acquisition for us. When he started out 4-7-1, either 4-7-1 or 4-6-1, there was a lot of chirps against him, but like I said, he's 12-2 in his last 14, and he's had a couple of shutouts in that span. So speaking of the scoring, Raymond was the first one to score for the Red Wings, and it was one of those crazy, freakish bounces off the boards where it came back in front of the net, and the goaltender was completely off guard, and it was an easy putback for Raymond on that. It was like you want to give the assist to the boards on that one. It reminds me of when Kopp had a weird bounce off the boards in Pittsburgh a week or two ago in that overtime loss. But once again, these bounces come off the boards, and the goalies are trying to play them. They're trying to keep their eyes in the back of the head, but they're also trying not to get themselves too out of position. But when those bounces happen like that, they can't help but being out of position, and that's what happened both times. Kopp did it in Pittsburgh, put it back in, and pretty much fairly easy goal. And the same thing for Raymond on Saturday in Montreal. So that started off the scoring for the Red Wings. Then Larkin got his 23rd to take the team lead from DeBrincat, and guess who basically tied Larkin back up with his own goal, basically half of a period and then some later. I think that one was the one that was on the power play. Kane got the assist on that, so one more point for Kane. He's only 5 points away from passing Madonna for the all-time lead for a U.S.-born player, so great job. Kane to DeBrincat. I mean, how many times are we going to hear that? Or the opposite, DeBrincat to Kane. It just happens, folks. It's just those two, that connection they have. It's great. So the fourth goal was by Kopp. So Kopp has goals. He has points in his last 3, and he has goals in 3 of his last 5 games. So Kopp is pretty, heating up pretty good. We like to see that the Red Wings are obviously well spread out offensively. We got Larkin and DeBrincat up there in goals, but Raymond leads everybody in points, and so I'm always glad when Raymond can get a goal. I think Raymond's 3rd on the team in goals behind Larkin and DeBrincat, and I think Kane is 4th or 5th in points, and then we got JVR there in goals, knocking at Raymond's back. And then we got Finn's trying to get into that double digits. So there's goals being scored here, there, and everywhere. And it's a good sign for the team to have that kind of depth. When somebody's not getting as hot, you don't rely so much on somebody. You don't have a 60, 65 goal scorer. That's been the case in Toronto, and also in Washington and elsewhere. Pasternak got 60 that one year when the Bruins won 65 games and didn't even get out of the first round. So it's great to have those kinds of moments, and it's great to have those kinds of seasons. But really, what really helps to get you deeper playoff runs is that depth and to have that widespread scoring. And so I like that. I'm liking what I'm seeing out of the Red Wings right now. To have 2 40-goal scores, which is the pace that those two are on, DeBrincat and Larkin, that'd be great. I wish I could call them the M&M boys, but there's no M in either of their names really, so that doesn't work. But still, they're clicking, and when they're not clicking, somebody else is. So the Red Wings are looking pretty good. They do have a tough matchup tonight, going up against Carolina. The last time they played, the Red Wings lost in Carolina. That was a couple of weeks ago. The Red Wings are 5-6-2 against the Metropolitan Division. That's one of the divisions they're having a little bit of a hard time against. I think 2 of those losses were against the Islanders, 1 against the Hurricanes, 1 against the Devils, and 1 against the Rangers, and I believe there was 1 more that I'm missing. I can't put my finger on it, but still 5-6-2. Like I said, the first meeting between these two teams, the Red Wings didn't do too well in the second period. They had a 1-0 lead, and then they gave up 3 goals to kind of really take them off their rhythm. They made it a little bit closer, I think, with a goal, but then I think that Carolina obviously had the last laugh. I think they got a late empty netter to really put it out of reach. But 5-2, I believe, was the last time that these two played. Red Wings have obviously been doing a lot better. Obviously holding it down a little bit defensively. They've been doing great, keeping themselves out of the penalty box. So if we can avoid one of those, freakish periods where they put 3 in on us, I think we got pretty good shot looking at it. Basically, the injuries, Kochetkov and Legault are on the IR. Philp may be out with a concussion. I believe the advantage goes their way on the power play and penalty kill, but also an advantage to Carolina is goals forced, goals allowed, shots on goals, and shots on goals allowed. So if the Red Wings can kind of turn it around a little bit. Speaking of the goaltenders, Busey, I'm not going to say Busey because that's Gary. Busey looking to get the nod basically with a 2.28 goals against average compared to Gibson's 2.75. Now, Gibson's defense, I believe that 2.75 has a lot to do with that. Like I said, he started out the season about 4-6-1. I'd like to think that a lot of that 2.75 is factored into that because really he's been doing great and is more along the lower twos as far as GAA in his last several starts. But should be a pretty tough game for the Red Wings. Carolina's always always a solid team. They've been a solid team longer than most teams. To consider the fact that they really haven't been back to the Stanley Cup final since they won it all in 2006. But they're, these last, especially with Brind'Amour behind the bench, they have been really just tearing it up, and they've been a solid force. Obviously, their weakness is the Florida Panthers. It seems almost day in and day out, especially in the postseason. But they're a tough team all the same. Don't take anything for granted. You're going to go against a tough opponent tonight, Detroit. We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow's show. But hopefully we see another W out of the Red Wings. Talking about the Atlantic Division, we can do this real quick because basically, like I had already said, Red Wings jumped back into first place with that win, but they're only a point up on Tampa Bay with their 9-game win streak, so they're always going to be a threat. The other thing about Tampa Bay is they've got 3 games in hand. So as much as we like being the top of the division in these days, just always keep in mind the fact that those games in hand really could catch up and bite us in the butt a little bit later in the season. But as long as we're winning and keeping ourselves, pertinent, relevant, whatever word you want to call it, that starts with something and ends with int. That's what the Red Wings are doing right now. They're very relevant, staying atop the Atlantic Division. Basically, now beyond that, that's kind of like our bottleneck right there. There's basically 1 point or 2 points separating the top 3 teams in the Atlantic, between the Red Wings, the Lightning, and the Canadiens. But then we got another bottleneck for positions 4 through 7. Basically, 4th place is now basically a virtual tie with Buffalo and Boston. Buffalo is 13-1 in their last 14 games. And Boston beat the ever-loving tar out of the Rangers over the weekend. And then they beat, I can't remember who they beat, but they beat them 1-0 yesterday. And so they had 2 wins over the weekend. So they're basically tied for that 4th spot with Buffalo. And then Maple Leafs, with their 3-game winning streak, are now sitting at 6. So they've leapfrogged back over. I believe we were talking a week or so ago that the Maple Leafs were sitting in the cellar. They've actually been doing pretty well for themselves to not only get out of the cellar, but now they're sitting basically at 6th and have leapfrogged the Panthers. Now the Panthers are sitting at 49 points. So basically between 4th and 7th in the Atlantic, you've got 3 points separating them. You've got 2 points separating 1st through 3rd. You got 3 points separating 4th through 7th. Very tough division. The discrepancy between 1st and 8th has gone up a little bit better in the last week. It was sitting at 10 for between 1st and 8th. Now it's at 13. So there's a little bit of a stretch with the Senators struggling the way that they've been doing. So that's basically 1st to 8th. And the Atlantic is this is why there's such great parity in this league, and this is why people enjoy watching hockey, because there's no surefire team that is just guaranteed, well, except for Colorado obviously, but even in Colorado and their division, as much as well as they're doing, Dallas and Minnesota are not left too far back in the rearview mirror. They're being very competitive, and they're showing their mettle as they are too. So that's why I love the NHL, is because you just never know, 1 week or the next who's out of it and who's not. Now, speaking of being out of it and not, we're getting to that point where in the next few weeks there's going to start to be trade talks, and we're going to go through the rumor mill here a little bit, but a couple of teams that I feel like are probably getting to that tipping point, if not already past that tipping point, is Calgary, St. Louis, and Columbus. Columbus had a win last night in Utah, so maybe I shouldn't count them out too much. But yeah, when you have St. Louis obviously is in a very tough division, and basically you're not going to get those top 3 in that division. But if you're not even going to look at those at the 7 or 8 seed, this might be a situation where St. Louis is already thinking, okay, next year. But obviously that was a way they were thinking back in the 2018-2019 season, and guess what? They won it all. So you just never know with this league. But defenseman Falk Another Falk out of St. Louis, this time on the ice and not on the gridiron. But Justin Falk is one of the trade talks targets out of St. Louis. And then, Calgary is basically down there towards the cellar of the Pacific Division, and they've had a couple of their players in the rumor talks as well. So I see some of these players being obviously looked after, and the other one is Columbus, as far as teams that may be on that tipping point to maybe start unloading and trying to get better draft picks to make it a better start out of next year, and try to, instead of trying to put lipstick on a pig in this season moving forward. We're already past the halfway point. They may be thinking, okay, what's the point doing this? Who knows? So we got some players that I think Merzlikins is the goaltender for Columbus, and I think he might be in some discussions. Could be wrong, but also looks like Boone Jenner is another one who may be in talks of somebody that they'd be looking after. Sometimes these things just aren't up to date enough, and sometimes these players go, like Chinikov was somebody who was a rumored player to be in danger of getting traded away from Columbus, and guess what? He's in Pittsburgh. So, next week we may be having a completely fresh list of players. But yeah, Falk's a good defenseman. I actually had him on my fantasy team for a little bit, and I think he'd be a great acquisition for somebody who's really looking to tone up their defense. Now the Golden Knights, basically with Pietrangelo basically being forced into retirement, have had their struggles in defense with Shea Theodore being out. Shea Theodore's back in, and now he's scoring. He's a threat as well, and that's obviously indicative of the Golden Knights. Whenever he's doing well and he's effective, they're effective as well. But like I said, having that Pietrangelo hole in your defense has really been something that's led them to, they're not necessarily struggling too bad this year, but there's a lot more hopes and there's a lot more expectations out of a team like Vegas, especially picking up Marner and having the healthy players that they have with Eichel and Stone when he's healthy. So, with Theodore basically come back into it, but that's not going to make factor in anything with the Colorados, Minnesotas, and Dallases out there, and having to basically top them up. And don't forget, you're in the same division as Edmonton, so we'll just see as we get closer who makes the right moves and who's left basically saying next year with 20 or 30 games left still on the schedule, already thinking next year. So this has been at Red Wings Daily. Tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about tonight's game. We'll have a recap. Until then, LGRW from the PNW.